Hello and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live, and I'm Cyril Stover. Time to wish you all a very happy new year. Well, President Bola Tinubu on Monday the 1st of January signed the 2024 appropriation bill into law, in keeping with his avowed commitment to maintaining a timeless, predictable and efficient budget cycle. The President assented to the bill in his office at the Presidential Villa, State House, and assured Nigerians that the implementation of the budget would be efficiently pursued and vigorously monitored. The budget of 28.7 trillion with an increase of 1.2 trillion naira over the proposal which was submitted to the National Assembly is anchored on reducing the deficit and increasing capital expenditure, particularly in priority areas. It contains an increase in the capital side, a reduction in recurrent expenditure, and it brought down the deficit from 6.11% to 3.88%. Tonight, NTA Tuesday Live will focus on the breakdown of the 2024 fiscal document. But before we go into the conversation, let's get to see this report put together by State House correspondent Musbau and Wahab.
As approved appropriation bill was here delivered.
Signing the Appropriation Act is a great honor because to me as a politician and head of state, there is no holiday.
The budget presented on November 29, 2023 returned just 1 month later and 1.2 trillion naira higher, but the President takes it in good faith.
I thank the National Assembly for this prompt review, adjustment, and what they deem necessary. This is an evidence and a great testament to the excellent relationship between the executive and the legislature.
Student loan, school feeding, cash transfer, consumer credits, and other life-lifting projects and programs promised by the government are now expected to get the necessary financial impetus from the first budget of renewed hope, as the President says his aim is to reduce deficits in development by increasing capital expenditure.
It means a lot. It means where the hope is hanged in development, and particularly human capital development.
With the appropriation law now in place as the ginger for performance, the man in front re-emphasized his commitment to good governance.
A budget is only as good as its implementation. We will implement it. I want to assure the Nigerians that all the MDAs and our teams have been warned. That's why we even take our time to separate economic planning from finance. The goal is to promote efficiency, dedication, and accountability. If you cannot do that, you may have to leave us.
The Presidential Monitoring and Delivery Unit is in place to track performance. Just a reminder. From the State House, Musbau and Wahab.
All right, that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. We'll go ahead and introduce our guests. We'd like to welcome to this program the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Atiku Bagudu. Minister, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Cyril. Thank you for inviting me.
Right.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
All of you.
We're joined by Professor Ken Ife, a development economist. Prof, always good to see you.
Thank you. And such a pleasure. Happy New Year.
Right, Happy New Year. Let me also welcome to this program Professor Aderibigbe Olomola. He's an economist at the Nigerian Institute of Social and Economic Research, NISA. He joins us from Ibadan. Prof, thanks for joining us. Let me also welcome tonight Professor Wumi Iledari, Professor Emeritus of Petroleum Economics at the Louisiana State University in the United States of America, also the Executive Director, Emmanuel Egbuga Foundation, Abuja. He joins us via Zoom from the USA. Prof, it's good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Thank you again for the invitation.
Right.
Thank you.
I thank you. Well, it's Tuesday Live. Tonight we're talking about this budget that's tagged Budget of Renewed Hope. And as you well know, the character of the program, at some point in time, you will have an opportunity to join in the discussion in the studio. But for now, let's go straight to the issue the issues at stake, and that's the 2024 budget, which was signed into law by the President just yesterday. Minister, give us an insight into this document that the country will now operate.
Well, thank you, Cyril. And you have done the introduction already, because you rightly said yesterday at the presidential villa, President Ahmed Bola Tinubu signed into law the 2024 appropriation that was passed by the National Assembly, which is in the sum of 28.77 trillion naira, which is 1.2 trillion naira more than the proposal which Mr. President submitted to the National Assembly on November 29th. And the National Assembly, in its wisdom, felt that the exchange rate of 750 naira can be increased to 800, an increase of 50 naira, because they felt in their own wisdom the economic reality dictates so, and also it will generate more revenue to fund the budget. Equally, they increased the revenue that should be sourced from government-owned enterprises. They think we can all do better in generating. And Mr. President, being the Democrat that he is, accepted that he presented his proposals, but the National Assembly, in the exercise of their constitutional role, have felt they can do, we can all do differently. And Mr. President was humble enough to acknowledge the separation of power and the right of the National Assembly, and accented to the budget. And these are assumptions we believe that are reasonable and that we can depend. And consequently, we are sure that all hands will be on deck to implement the budget, to realize the revenue. In fact, Mr. President was very clear about it. This is a budget that will make everyone earn his job. Everyone, from those who are in charge of collecting the revenue or monitoring the revenue payments, and those who are responsible for his spending. Budget efficiency, as he rightly said, accountability, watchwords that will characterize the implementation. He has directed, Mr. President has directed a monthly reporting system, so that at the end of each month we know where we are with the budget. We believe the National Assembly have done well in supporting the budget of renewed hope, which Mr. President characterized clearly. We have in this budget reduced deficit from the 2023 level of 6.11% of GDP to 3.88. I think that's a very significant, and this goes a long way in supporting the restoration of macroeconomic stability. And this is one of those indices that is watched by the private sector, domestic and international. And even the rating agencies, 3 rating agencies that have improved their outlook on Nigeria have mentioned, among others, this reduction in deficit. Equally significant is the increase in capital expenditure. But as Mr. President warned yesterday, that it's not an end in itself, but why it is significant is that more spending is provided for in the budget in all the priority areas: agriculture and food security, economic growth, job creation, inclusivity and access to capital, rule of law, and transparency and accountability. All the spending to the defense, national security sector has improved. Spending on infrastructure has improved. Spending on human capital has improved. Funds have been provided for consumer credits so as to support boost in manufacturing activity. Fund has been provided for the mortgage sector so as to support boost in construction sector. Fund has been provided, a 100 billion naira fund has been provided for the National Agricultural Development Fund to further support the budgetary provision for the ministry for sustainable agriculture. The 50 billion has been provided for the student loans, just to all provide inclusivity, as well as 100 billion naira to expand the national non-discriminatory school feeding program for all children going to school, so that it will support school attendance, it will support better nutritional outcomes, so that our children can do better. There has been concern by the nutritional practitioners that the grey matter under investment is a significant issue in our economy, and this is one of such measures that we believe will reverse the so this is a budget that is clearly supporting our going in the right direction, as have been started by the bold measures that have been taken to reduce distortion in the economy, fuel subsidy withdrawal, foreign exchange liberalization. Thank you.
All right, Minister, the comprehensive rundown of what's been put into this budget. We'll, as we progress in the course of this discussion, take a more in-depth look at how these will impact the Nigerian state. But Professor Kenife, looking at this, a cursory look at the budget, what are your feelings?
Look, I quite like what I saw yesterday, and impeccable timing. In fact, I had some doubts before, but I can't tell you that what I saw yesterday gave me a lot of hope for the economic future of our country. One is that to even begin by having a ministry for economic planning is something that when I heard about that, I was saying to God, who is going to head this? And incidentally, we got an embodiment of energy and what have you, and integrity. And this is going to make a significant difference in the scheme of things. And also to have another Minister of Finance that works very closely with him shows that we're heading somewhere. Now, if you look at the budget fundamentals from the fiscal strategy paper, I call it a budget of realism because they were realistic. You know, you couldn't fault the figures in the fiscal strategy paper. So we know that from the moment I saw that, I said, okay, now let's see what comes out as the detail. And to see how the balancing has been done. For example, you know, according to the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, our fiscal deficit should be 3% of GDP. But although there has been an uplift on that, but it has actually brought this down. So, which is very important, as you mentioned, fixed rating agencies and all of that. But it's very, very important that we work to, you know, to cut our coat according to our size. And there are other things that it will have impact on. For example, balance of trade, balance of payment, all of that will also take a cue from that. And the way that not only that the ministers were given marching orders by way of their performance, remember what happened about the retreat. Ministers have performance targets that they have to. Then you now have a budget. Everybody worries about budget because not many people want to engage on discussions on budget because they said budget says something, nothing happens, or you don't get a tight follow-up. And then to hear the president say today that he wants a monthly M&E. So people are not going to cut and run on this. And then the review, we give it to the National Assembly. They have oversight function. And I remember for more than 15 years, I've been writing to all the presidents and all the ministers. I said, try and sort out the level of National Assembly interjection on your budget. And then, but they're working harmoniously. It's no longer an issue. So what that means, it bodes well for the future, the understanding and coordination between them. So when you now look at the budget parameters, the macroeconomic parameters, however you look at it, there's convergence in the macroeconomic parameters from what we have seen on this budget. And we have little doubt that it will be implemented. And also you could see that even with the revision, look at capital. We got butchered on investment on human capital, but there's a lot going in there. It started with 7% to health, but now it's even more when you look at the additional injections into some of the basic, even education. Education was around 3, but now it's a lot more when you now take into account the other basic education and all of that. So there are many things that have got more money and then more muscle for the delivery side of it and more monitoring and evaluation that will follow through. So I think as we discuss this more, we will see why there is hope in the budget.
All right, thanks, Professor Kenife. Let's also join our other economists from the Nigerian Institute of Social and Economic Research, NISA, Professor Aderibigbe Olomola, who's joining us from Ibadan. Prof, I believe you can hear me at this time. Prof, I believe you can hear me at this time.
Yeah, yes, please. Yes, sorry.
I believe you can hear me at this time.
Yeah, yes, please. Yes, sorry.
Look at it as it was signed into law by the president yesterday. What are your thoughts about this budget, and do you think it will really address the numerous issues that the nation has? And do you think it will really...
Thank you very much, Cyril. First of all, let me point out that I used to be in NISA, and I retired from NISA March this year. I was there for several years, and we have been looking at the budget process over the years. This particular budget of renewed hope has a lot of parameters that we could regard as something that will address the situation of the economy. The economy has been struggling. And when you look at the 2024 budget, you will see the structure of the budget in terms of capital expenditure, recurrent expenditure, the proportions, and what has been done this time around to balance a number of imbalances we have been experiencing. We have the capital expenditure, for example, the proportion has been increasing, is now about 34.5% of the total budget, standing at 10 trillion. And then compare to the others, we have the current expenditure strictly around 8.8 trillion naira, and then about strictly 30% of that. And then you see debt service also about another 8.2 trillion, and then transfers 1.7 trillion. I think what we need to look at this stage, usually we have budget like this prepared, hardly will you want to fault it in terms of the structure, in terms of the allocations. But what you want to see is the monitoring. We used to have this monitoring unit. Emphasis has always been in monitoring, and renewed emphasis is there now. I think it's in the right direction too. And if those who will implement this budget will have the same spirit to deliver, then we'll be able to see how the economy will grow. We have a target of about 2.4% in this 2.9%, up from 2.4% growth in the GDP. And we feel that this is a very conservative target, which can be achieved based on the allocation, particularly in capital, as we have seen, and also based on the developments in the economy. If you look at what is going to happen in the oil sector, for example, we know that Dangote, based on the first quarter, will start operational to come up on operation in the first quarter, and this will drastically reduce import of petroleum products, strictly therefore improving the situation of balance of trade. And this will be a tailwind that can propel the growth of the economy, even right away. So I think we are having a number of things, but the increase, the adjustment by the National Assembly, by the 1.2 trillion, we'll see how that one results in the even fiscal deficit or budget deficit that we have. The intention is to reduce the deficit proportion. It has been done from 6.11% last year to 3.88% now, but we still have 1.77 trillion, which will have to be financed through foreign borrowing. I think this is an area where we have to look at critically to say that we mark this borrowing to capital development strictly, not in the area of even administrative capital, but in terms of capital development that will be people-oriented. And that is where we'll begin to see the impact of this budget. So I think these are the things we need to watch, even as we monitor vigorously. We look at the service-wide votes this time around. It has been increasing every year. You know, in 2018, it increased by 2.81%. In 2021, by 5.5%. But this year, it has increased by 16.1%, with a chunk of about 4.41 trillion going into service-wide. The management of this huge amount needs a lot of vigor. And how this will translate to the reality that we want, that of realizing budget objectives, need to be carefully monitored.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. We'll return to you in just a moment, but time for us to link up with Professor Iledari, who joins us via Zoom from the US. Well, Prof, so far you must have heard the trend of the discussions, taking a general look at budget 2024, which the administration says is a budget of hope. Professor Ken Ife here says he thinks it's a realistic attempt to address the Nigerian economy. What are your thoughts generally on this budget?
Well, again, thank you for the invitation. I hope you can hear me clearly. Budget is more or less based on assumptions, and it has two components to it. And I see that everybody seems to have addressed the expenditure component. Budget is more or less like an authorization for expenditure. But there are two components to it. One, expenditure, the other component is income. And income is a projection, not an actual thing at the beginning of the budget. First, I must commend the administration for at least passing their budget on time. Here in the United States, we still fight about budget nearly every time. So getting the National Assembly and the executive passing the budget for 2024 this quickly, I think is commendable. Secondly, I will also commend the administration's intent to put more effort on capital expenditure, which will have a multiplier effect on the economy. And also looking at the budget, I see they are not also letting go some of the social spending that are necessary in the budget. That is a realistic budget. It's subjective and debatable because of the assumptions. I'm happy that to a large extent, the assumption of the budget when it went to the House is no longer 3-point-something%, which was my concern before. When you try to have an assumption of a higher growth than what you have experienced over many years, that to me is something to look at, and I think they looked at it. I understand that the addition of 1.7 trillion by the National Assembly is funded by an assumption of increasing the exchange rate from 750 to around 800 and something. Again, those are just a mathematical way of balancing budget. They wanted more money, and so they increased the exchange rate. That the budget is fundable is not necessarily what I'm going to argue, because nearly everywhere in the world, in times like this, you have to borrow money to sustain your budget because of the unpredictability of the macroeconomic cycle. But what I can advise the government to do is to ensure that when you borrow money, it is used for something that can generate money to pay the deficit. I think for now, I'm still worried with respect to the assumption of production, because I think I heard the minister saying that they will produce 2 million barrels per day, both liquid and condensate, in 2024. Those are things we need to monitor very well. Is it that we don't have reserves to produce it? No, we have enough reserve to even produce 3-point-something million per day. But resources are not just translated to production and cash, just like that. So there are so many things we need to make sure we monitor. And number one is the security in the Niger Delta, as well as oil theft. But all of these are manageable. So I think because the price that is assumed is conservative, even if we don't meet the production target, which I think is going to be around 1.5 to 1.6 million, as long as we can consistently produce it, we'll still be all right. And finally, I think we need to understand the role of the new NNPC Limited. I like the idea that other ministries and departments and agencies of the government must begin to think of not retaining the money that belongs to the Federation account. But NNPC Limited is no longer the old NNPC. And I don't think the government is willing to take that new dispensation with respect to the way they budget money that will come to NNPC. There must be a better understanding of PIA definition of the new NNPC Limited. The federal government must be very careful with respect to targeting more money to come from the NNPC, because that would be breaking the law. That would be breaking the law. The federal government is no longer in charge of NNPC Limited. The NNPC Board of Directors is in charge, and they are going to be behaving the same way Shell is behaving with respect to what they pay to the government. And so depending on them to fund the government is questionable, in my opinion. And I hope the Minister for Budget Planning will take note of that. Stop using NNPC as more or less a poster child when things don't work the way you want it to work. PIA has absorbed NNPC Limited from the agency role when you are thinking of your budget. And finally, so that others could have time, the 28 point something trillion naira linked onto exchange rate of 850 naira per dollar, linked to oil price that is about $78 to $80 per barrel, is very stochastic. And this is where effectiveness, efficiency, ethical behavior, and equity, realizing that the federal government budget is not alone in this journey we are making to have a budget of hope. And nearly every state depends on the federation account money. So government cannot be asking the agencies to spend money on their behalf outside the budget. I will encourage the Minister of Budget or Economic Planning to be disciplined in terms of enforcing some of these instruments in the budget if we want it to be able to make an impact that we would like it to make. Hope is based on facts. In a scriptural sense, only hope that is anchored on faith is not disappointing. It's a good budget under the circumstances in which we have, but three important letters are critical if we are going to accomplish the objective. And I think the president alluded to that when he talks about governance. 4 E's I always talk about every time I have opportunity: efficiency, effectiveness, equity, and ethical behavior. If we are able to optimize a strategy to focus on those 4 dimensions, I think the hope that is expected to materialize in this budget will be possible. But without effective way of implementation, efficient way whereby you use less to get more, and equity and business ethics, and that's where transparency and accountability comes in. Let those who are supposed to implement this budget stay accountable to the principal officers. Reward and sanctions are key. This is the first budget for this administration in a way, and people are watching. We can only keep our hope alive by being efficient and effective. But remember, NNPC Limited is no longer the cash cow for the federal government. It belongs to the federation. So be mindful of that.
Thank you so much, Prof. Yes, and we'll just take off from where you left off. And the matter of the concerns raised about the budget and looking at the two sides. So far, we've dwelt on what the budget will do. But now comes the other critical side of it, which is funding the budget. And that's where we go to with the Minister this time. Minister, funding this budget.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the two professors, both from NISA and from Louisiana, that have just spoken. And the budget estimate that revenue will be about 19 trillion and the deficit of about 9.17 trillion, which will be funded, interestingly, and to assure the market, will not be funded from ways and means, because part of the legislation that was passed yesterday was the approval by the National Assembly for the executive to securitize the remaining largely inherited ways and means, and then the confidence and the assurance that the President had given that we will no longer resort to ways and means in funding the budget. And I think that is a very significant step. Secondly, we are not intent on relying on NNPC alone. When we make projection for 1.8 million barrels a day projection, we recognize that the oil industry contains different companies, and we will put pressure on all to produce based on agreements that they have entered with the upstream regulatory agencies or the various production sharing contracts. And once the production is increased, which we believe can be increased in a very short time, given all the measures that have been taken, given all the investment in security in both the Niger Delta, given the support of the communities and governors from in the oil producing states, and the leadership that is being provided by Mr. President, we believe the revenue projections are achievable. And equally important is the fact that in the last 6 months, there has been a lot of personal attention that has been given by Mr. President to investment drive, and we are already seeing the benefits. So even as we are working the 2024 budget, we believe the revenue base will be expanding. The tax reforms that Committee on Tax Reform have made significant progress. A number of digitization initiatives to capture revenue are taking place. Some, I believe, have even been rolled out today, and some more will be rolled out. The foreign exchange market, there have been 2 executive orders in order to ensure that both the backlog and the forward contracts are dealt with, and a rule-based system has now evolved, and everyone will know what the game is. And equally, that the funding to the judiciary has literally doubled is very significant, because it shows that, consistent with his belief that only a rule-based society can deliver equity and prosperity, and at the heart of it is funding security and justice sector. So we believe the combination of all this will ensure that we achieve our revenue projection. The capital projections, we believe, are modest, and those investments are enablers. And in fact, the capital cost, the capital budget itself is almost 39% of the budget, because when you take the statutory transfers of 1.742 trillion, you have to disaggregate the statutory transfers in both capital and recurrent. So when you add the over 1 trillion naira capital component of the statutory transfers, the capital spending is closer to 40% and this will enable expanding the economy to collect more revenue.
You know, in all of this, the Minister, the first thing you think about is, yes, there is looking away from oil being the major revenue earner, but there are other sources. Now, which are these other practical sources? And one worry in the minds of most Nigerians would be, is this going to lead to stiffer and more taxes?
No, certainly. It has been communicated very well that the Presidential Tax Reform Committee, they have made presentation, they have spoken publicly, is to simplify the tax code so that even at the current levels is to make it easy, make it predictable, and make collection, enable us to collect more. And as we expand the economy, the tax base will continue to expand. And then not by introducing more taxes, but by efficiency, by digitization, so that everyone can contribute. Those who ought to contribute should contribute.
All right, Minister. Professor Kenny, please take it up.
Well, when you talk about digitization, Lagos provides a very good example, because what they did on their revenue by computerization just showed quantum jump on their revenue. So there is a lot of mileage there. Then also you have organizations that, for example, if you look at the increments in the state-owned enterprises, those increases, the increment there shows that they are beginning to look at what else, where else can you get more money. And we know that if the amendment is finally done with, which is Amendment of Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, we will be able to have the teeth and to be able to penalize and then get more money off the SOEs. So that we know. And then we also know that the new organization that the government has, which is the Ministry of Finance Incorporated, has its own target and has its own drive to move away from debt-based financing to asset-based financing. And that is very critical because on one hand, well, I mean, I'm so happy that we are going to be done with ways and means. I mean, it's inflationary. Ways and means is inflationary. Nobody wants to talk about that. It is inflationary because you are printing money and then they have impact on inflation. But when we are doing away with that, and then we are going to be moving away from, and even the financing that, even the debt financing that we are going to have, I've had the Minister of Finance say, look, I want to subject anything and everything to cost-benefit analysis. Now, that's what is provided for in the FRA 2007.
Well, since you're on that subject...
The shift towards asset-based financing, you've seen that. If you're talking about 14 billion coming from India, they're all going there. You've seen all the things coming out, they're all heading to assets, so that you can have liquidity that you need in the system, and liquidity is king.
I'm not cutting you short, Prof, but you just expressed some excitement that you're doing away with ways and means, which you've described as inflationary. Do you worry about borrowing?
No, I'm just telling you that borrowing, we're going for 1.5 billion from World Bank and the budget support, but it's at a concessionary rate, and I can support that. And then you also see that in the borrowing, we're trying to keep away as much as possible from domestic borrowing as much as possible. You still wouldn't be able to go with it as much as possible so that you don't crowd out private sector investment, especially where we are now in a regime where the CBN is looking at pulling out a little bit more from the domestic-based financial intervention. So we're going to have to make sure we don't completely, crash out the private sector investment. So a lot of it will still going to be coming. A lot of it will still be coming from foreign-based development in a different environment where we are subjecting this to cost-benefit analysis. There's nothing wrong in borrowing. What is wrong is that what you borrowed money for should be able to retire the loan. So when you are borrowing, it has to be purposeful. And the law stipulates carefully, says all borrowing should be for capital expenditure and human resource development. And human resource development is health, is education, is employment. You don't borrow to pay for to cash out to share. No, it is and you don't borrow to pay salaries. So that's what the law says. And the law is even went to the extent of saying that apart from requiring cost-benefit analysis and all of that, to ensure that the borrowing is for the purpose and that is intended to repay. It even warns financial institutions like our banks that any lending outside this framework is unlawful. So you can see that the law is there, but we just need to give it teeth so that we can enforce and get a lot more money out. So in summary, Minister is right that the balance of borrowing is in favor of re-engineering the economy. And I also know that there are other nerves that they are taught. When the president made that speech in 29th of May, he tired the honest knot. Everybody knew that Nigerian economy was on the cliff. We don't know how deep that pit is. We know it is on intensive unit. We needed to do something urgently to put it in a recovery position. So when the president made that statement and they dished out those two things, budget, the subsidy thing and then the bank rates, the moment he did that, he tired the honest knot. And then suddenly we now began to see the depth of the challenge that we have. And, I think that 2024 will see a more realistic control of our economy. And then you have to see that you have to see a much more control. So things are going to get a lot better. But, you don't make excuses about what happened in the last 7 months. They had to happen because you have stirred the honest knot and everybody now knows how deep, the pit where we are.
Okay, thanks, Prof. But again, we'll go to Ibadan and link up once more with Professor Aderigbe Olomola. And so far, we have moved to the other side of it now, and we're considering how this budget will be funded and the many ways that the dependence or near total dependence on oil with all its vagaries, and of course realizing what Professor Iledari drew attention to about the role of the NNPC Limited given by the PIA. What are your thoughts about other sources of revenue and how reliable it will be for this country to move within a short period? And with this, I want you to bear in mind that rightfully so, Nigerians are in a hurry to get things better.
Thank you very much, Cyril. To fund the budget and probably to also finance the deficit, we need to look at other sources or also do things differently. And the first point here is to reduce wasteful spending. We don't have too much revenue. If you look at this budget, the revenue is about 18 trillion naira. And debt servicing is about 8.8 trillion naira, amounting to about 45% of our revenue. This shows that we need to reduce wasteful spending. With this, we can still reduce our spending further so that by the time we want to see the performance of the budget, we will ensure that we are spending on things that we really need to spend on. As the economy is struggling, we cannot be flamboyant. We cannot be financing capital items around administration. Let us finance capital items that will lead to development and will lead to the improvement in the life of Nigerians. And the second point in terms of having revenue is not to go along the way of frequent devaluation to the extent that the National Assembly itself say we can monetize the exchange rate and say instead of 750, let's make it 800 something. That is some sort of devaluation in a budget year, in a budget exercise. Outside the regime of the CBN, which is the monetary authority, I think we don't want to create problems, even in terms of managing the exchange rate. By fiat, in just one meeting session, say that let us move from 750 to over 800 in terms of the exchange rate so that we can have more money. This is a matter of concern, and I would like the monetary authority to look into this, and also want the policy authority in terms of National Assembly to work with the CBN before coming with this kind of outright devaluation and devaluation by fiat. But one fundamental thing we need to do to enhance our foreign exchange capacity is to have an export development plan so that we can generate export revenue outside the oil sector. And I know that the Ministry of Budget and Planning is equal to the task to really move away from just identifying export commodities, which the Minister of Trade has been doing. Oh, we have 41 items that we can export. This list has always been there. Over the past 16 years, we have expanded the list. We have so many items on our export list. What has happened? What export revenue have they generated? This is the time for us to articulate an export development plan. Get these commodities listed, see what we can do, look at the value chains of these commodities, see how they will be produced, and see that they will be exported, and let us have a kind of a plan during this administration, during the next 4 years. What export revenue are we going to be generating year by year? So by the time the Ministry of Budget and Planning articulates this, in conjunction with Ministry of Trade and Industries, and then the export promotion and other related parastatals, we can have this export development plan put in place within 6 months so that we can expand our foreign exchange, which is a major problem we are facing now in terms of shortage in foreign exchange and in terms of excessive reliance on the oil sector. So such that all the commodities that we produce in Nigeria, and we have competitive advantage in producing, we can develop them, move along the value chains, and export them. In the next 3 or 4 years, we're exporting some of these commodities. And then taking advantage of the African free trade regime, we were to export starting from within Africa, from within West Africa, to Africa, and then to the rest of the world, such that we'll be able to expand the foreign exchange capacity of the country, generate more foreign exchange outside the oil sector, so that we can have a boost in our revenue, so that we can continue to drastically reduce our budget deficit as we move on along this administration. I think this is an important task that can be quickly put in place, and then we then implement this, and we can see how this will lead to a boost in our foreign exchange earnings, and then it will reduce deficit further, and then it will also attend to all those things that leads to disinvestment in the country. Many of the companies that are leaving because of investment problem, because of problem in interest rate, then they will come back, and others will spring up, because the government will no longer be competing with the private sector in terms of borrowing. It is quite good that the government is reducing reliance on ways and means, so that interest rates will not increase further. This is a very good trend, and only a small proportion of the deficit that we attract foreign loan, about 1.77 trillion. I think this is very consistent. If we want to create investment, and the president has been talking about Nigeria being an investment haven, this policy is consistent. This budget is consistent with those policy pronouncements, so that government will not be crowding out the private sector. I say this is a very positive aspect in the budget. Only a very small proportion of what we need to borrow in this deficit goes to the foreign lenders, and so this is quite good. But one other thing we need to do in terms of revenue is the tax collection drive. The tax collection drive, and everybody, is a civil responsibility for everyone, every company, every enterprise that is due to pay tax, to pay the tax. I think Nigerians have to imbibe this to ensure that the revenue from tax is what we use mainly to finance a large chunk of our budget. And this is, in terms of having revenue to fund investment in the country, we not rely on federal budget alone. Where this is a federal budget we are reviewing, but all the state governments must take a cue in this, try to create opportunity for investors in their states, and try to use their own revenue also to drive investment in their states, to drive productivity in their states, so that at the end of the day, we can see how this will reflect in better growth in GDP. This GDP target of 2.9% is conservative. Many other African countries are in the range of 7.9%, Rwanda 7.9%, Cote d'Ivoire 7.1%, Benin about 6%, Tanzania about 5.6%, Ethiopia 6%. So our own 2.9% is very conservative. I think we can do better, and I'm sure by the time we finish the implementation of this budget, the performance can still be improved. And this one area that I feel the target is conservative, 2 point something, but we are relying on the 2.4 last year. But if we compare with what is happening in other African countries, I think we need to work hard so that we can have a better result in terms of our GDP growth rate at the end of this budget year.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Prof. Well, at this point, we'll take a short break. When we return, the phone lines will be open, and that means you can join in the conversation in the studio. We'll remind you of the process and procedure at that time, but stay with us. We'll be back shortly.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Right, thanks for staying with us. This segment, the phone lines will be open. You can join in the conversation. The numbers to call will be on your screen. You can take advantage of those. But as we always remind you, if you're calling in tonight and your call gets through to the studio, do us a favor, turn down the volume of your TV set. That's the way to avoid the hurlback or the echo. We say this every week. And we encourage you to go straight to the point. Keep it short and simple so others can get on the platform. And one other thing I always say is, never worry too much about the greetings. Just a simple hello would do. So please join in with your calls, or questions, or comments. And I guess would take on those issues as you might raise. Let me quickly go over to Professor Iledari in the US. And there's just this, before we went on break, Prof, if you can hear me, Professor Olomola was talking about his worries, his concerns about the exchange rate, which has shifted from 750 to about 800 naira to the dollar, and worries about what he calls some form of devaluation. But we do know there's just one official forex market. In practical terms, however, there are two. I'm thinking about how the operation of this and the consistent up and down of the naira, not finding some stability. How is this market on the streets, as people say, going to affect the stability of the naira? Which, of course, you need to know in terms of proper planning.
Well, again, thank you for the question. And it is because naira has been treated as a commodity. And so there's not much you can do unless you build your foreign reserves. And I think he said something to the effect of finding other means apart from depending on petroleum production. Unfortunately, I think we're going to be a little bit luckier with respect to building the value of the naira relative to the dollar, when we are able to have a lot of defining capacity for the integration of the value chain upstream, downstream, and midstream. And that's why I continue to encourage the government to do something about the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, where policy is supposed to be developed to address some of these issues head-on. Unfortunately, the place has limited capacity, and you are depending on agencies that do not necessarily have to be developing policy doing that, because policies are interrelated. And I think I said it before, there are four markets interacting at the same time. You have the money market, you have the resource market, you have the goods and services market, and you have the labor market. And once one of them is not in equilibrium, all the other markets are affected. And that's what you see with the foreign exchange. I'm hoping that by the time we're able to refine nearly a great proportion of the petroleum products that we will need, the pressure on foreign exchange will be less. And by the time we develop our tertiary education and medical facilities to be up there where they are supposed to be, all those medical tourism, educational tourism will be limited, and the demand for dollars in particular will be less, and the price you pay for it will be less, because it's more or less an interaction of demand for dollars and supply for dollars. Once there's that interaction of these fundamentals, there's nothing you can do but to experience volatility in the exchange rate. Well, let me go back again to funding this budget. And I'm emphasizing this because if the budget, the funding sources are not properly defined, the budget deficit will be high, irrespective of your original estimation. And again, that's why we continue to suggest what the PIA suggested, which is interagency group, where the agencies and ministries are not operating independently, but they have a forum in which they can meet so they can monitor what is going on. If you look at the 1.8 million barrels per day that is being projected, more than 60% of it is probably coming from deep water. And that means there's what we call the cost oil, which you take a great proportion of that 1.8 million barrels per day, and you have no taxes on that, even though you are going to have royalty. And the equity, which is the profit oil, a great proportion of it has been dedicated for Frontier Exploration Fund. So you have to be careful so as not to have a big assumption on this production. And I emphasize it the last time we were here. Right now, there's a difference between technical production and marketed production. As of now, the marketed production allocated to Nigeria is 1.5 million. We have not been able to meet it over the last 3 years. We have not been able to meet OPEC quota during the last 3 years. Yeah, I understand. The government is doing something to make sure we can increase that production. Yes, I also understand that out of that 1.8 million, about 0.3 million barrels per day is condensate. But condensate...
I'm sorry to cut you here, but just give us a moment, Prof. I'm sorry to stop you, but we have a caller on the line, Rabiu, calling in from Kano. It's been on for quite a while now. So, hello, Rabiu, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Just turn down the volume of your TV set and go ahead with a question or comment.
I've already turned down.
Right, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm just here to say hello to Honorable Minister. So also the presenter. Can you hear me? My question here is, does the budget touches this civil servant increment of salary? If it is, let me hear from the minister, sir. Thank you.
Very much. Straightforward question, Minister.
Well, thank you. The budget have taken into consideration the agreements reached by the various unions in respect of peculiar allowances, which have been approved by National Salaries, Wages and Incomes Commission, and it has provided for that. Secondly, the budget had made a provision in anticipation that the ongoing discussion between the federal government and the Nigerian Labour Congress about the minimum wage will come to protrusion. And where it does not, the agreement to continue paying a wage award until such an agreement has been reached has been provided for. Thank you.
All right, so Rabiu from Kano, I suppose that answers your question, right? Okay, thank you for calling in. And yes, if we just quickly go back to Professor Ileda. Okay, another question from Abdurrahman, who's calling in from Lagos. Abdurrahman, go ahead.
Yeah. From Lagos, yeah. Yeah, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Abdurrahman. I can hear the hurlback, the echo from your TV. Just turn it down.
I'm directing my question to Honorable Minister of Budget. Is about this thing, what they are calling. Why we can't put more money so this in the production of cocoa and the coffee and other items. So my thinking is that if we put more money there, so it will be easier for us to have many things to export, to do more exportation from Nigeria. So that is my question.
All right, thank you, Abdurrahman, Minister.
Thank you, Abdurrahman. Indeed, we recognize the potential of all sectors of the Nigerian economy, and I think Professor had earlier spoken about this. And we are putting more money in the agriculture so that we can produce more, we can export more. We have created a National Agricultural Development Fund, which is a 100 billion naira fund. But this fund, we will attract other funds to continue to grow it, and is to fund agriculture. Equally, the budget provision for the Ministry of Agriculture has grown significantly. It's over 800 billion naira. And this is also in recognition of the potential of the agricultural sector to generate growth, to generate income, and to generate exportable products so that we can earn more foreign exchange. Equally, you know, in addition to those funding mechanisms, the signaling provided by the budget is attracting the private sector. As Mr. President have led investment drive around the world, we have seen investors who are willing to put more money in the agricultural sector among other sectors of Nigeria. So we are optimistic that there will be more money going into all these sectors, both domestic and international, in given the enabling role that is being provided by the government.
All right. Thank you very much, Minister. We have another question coming through from Birnin Kabi. This is Umar Anache calling in. Hello, Umar.
Hello, Mr. Siro. I'm Umar Anache, as usual.
Right.
You are a regular caller.
Mm-hmm.
And compliment of the season and Happy New Year to all of you, particularly my former governor, His Excellency Elijah Tukuwabu, who is the current budget and economic planning. I see the wisdom of Mr. President, who separated finance from budget and economic planning. I give him kudos to that, because there are two things there matched together. I have seen the wisdom of Mr. President by separating them. But then, I have a question to His Excellency. What assurance, Your Excellency, are you going to give to Nigerians to make sure that budget is implemented to the letter? It is not going to be like failed the failed workout program of Uncle Barua, because I learned that even Mr. President is constituting a committee to review the Uncle Barua. What assurance are you going to give to Nigerians that this budget is not going to be like Uncle Barua? That is my first question. The second question is that Mr. President promised us a lot of things, like natural compressed gas buses, and even the palliative, he promised to state 5 billion naira. Later on, he said he was going to provide food. He gave them 2 billion naira, and even the workers, they were promised 35,000 naira each month. But I learned that it's only 1 month that is being settled. I don't know. Considering this type of scenario, what yardstick are we going to use to measure the performance of ministers? Since even the president promised and he did not complete his promise. May God continue to bless our country and see us through 2024 year successfully. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Umar Anachi. Minister, heard you.
Thank you, Mala Umar. On your first question as to what are we putting in place to ensure that the budget is implemented, is to start with the acknowledgement you have made that Mr. President, in his wisdom and given his past experience, separated the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning from that of Finance, where the minister doubled as the coordinator of the economy. in recognition of the effectiveness and what has been the value of that separation in Lagos. And so we have this ministry which is distinct from the Ministry of, and our mandate is to develop a plan-based budget. We have an Agenda 2050, we have the National Development Plan, we have the Renewed Hope Agenda, we have the 8-point agenda. So this budget grow from that recognition from the ministry. And equally, we have a monitoring and evaluation role in the ministry to ensure that the budget is implemented. Mr. President had cause to even remark that in Lagos, he refers to his Commissioner for Budget and Economic Planning as headmaster, because he insists that any spending must reflect the budget. And as you know, maybe you know me personally, I'm a headmaster's son. So maybe this is even going to be tougher, because I grew up seeing headmaster making the books to ensure that he gets it right. And I will use all of that skill to ensure that I maintain that confidence. And equally, the president leaves us in no doubt, all of us ministers and public officials, we have signed agreement that we will be held to account. We will be held to commitments that we made, and certainly I will lead my ministry, my hardworking and great team that I have. I am confident that we will provide the monitoring and evaluation that will see this budget implemented. It's not, I'm not in a position to make a judgment about the anchor borrowers, but this is my answer in respect. Secondly, you have raised about natural compressed gas buses. Indeed, Mr. President, as part of the 500 billion naira palliative program, it has provided 100 billion for the provision of compressed natural gas buses, which is in the pipeline. I'm aware about it. Procurement processes have been going on, and I'm sure Nigerians, in fact, some have been launched. In Dubai, he made mention to it, and some have been physically launched. Equally, in the 2024 budget, a provision of 130 billion naira has been made for the provision of support of tools and kitchen equipment to ensure the conversion of more buses and more motor vehicles to compressed natural gas, to continue with that program. Last but not the least, on the 35,000 cash award, what I did say earlier, yes, I'm aware that maybe there could have been an issue that I'm not the paying agent, but certainly there was an agreement to pay, and Mr. President directed that the budget money should be provided for the payment of the 35,000 cash award, and their money has been provided. Maybe there are other issues that is holding up the payment, but not lack of money. And even in the 2024 budget, I had cause earlier to mention that we have a provision where the national minimum wage has not been agreed. There was enough money to pay the wage award as agreed with Labour until such point.
Right, thank you, Minister. Another call from Port Harcourt. Are we sure about the Port Harcourt call still there? Chima from Port Harcourt, is he there? Chima from Port Harcourt, if you're there, go ahead with a question or comment.
Yeah. Good evening, Uncle Sir.
Good evening.
And good evening to Honorable Minister. I am representing the people of non-actors in the economy. My question goes to Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, I was been his fans when he was a governor. So I'm his fans. Now he's a minister for budget and I think Honorable Agriculture.
Thank you.
My question is this: the problem of this country, always from the budget or this thing, how do you solve this problem? How food will be in Nigeria's table? How the ordinary person will eat in this country? This budget, we have seen the budget now, and the agriculture have taken its own, but is it enough? Honorable Minister, I want to put something on this agricultural matter. How do we move forward? In this country, we have a lot of people, I'm sorry to say this, I'm sorry, I'm people lavishing in prison without production. Other countries, it goes to other countries, those people produce something. They produce what they eat and produce what other people eat. We have land. All the governors and everybody we are building. It's good to build road, do this or this. Say what our consuming? How do we feel? The children are now 100 billion for school feeding. There's 100 billion for school feeding. At the end of the day, it's through agriculture. So which way do we to put money in this agriculture? So that ordinary man will have this thing. A bag of fried rice, close to 600,000. Isn't it? No, government can put, even this subsidy they are removing, put it in agriculture. In bringing food, make it support to this country. People will not be traveling. It's not people who bring on the road. Everybody will walk on their own area and field.
Okay.
So please, on this economy, now we're talking about the Dangote refinery.
Okay. Right, Chima.
So that this refinery will work, so that also the fuel price will come down. This was worrying us, sir.
Okay, thank you, Chima. The minister will respond to this. Yes.
Thank you, Chima. I think I've literally touched on this before. This budget and President Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu recognize and appreciate the importance of domestic production. And he has said so. It's key to his agenda. The first item of the 8th priority agenda is agriculture and food security. And we are putting more money into that. We are tasking all those who are in charge of, who have responsibility for agriculture, both at the federal and statutory bodies where money is transferred, like the Niger Delta Development Commission, North East Development Commission, to use more of their money to boost domestic agricultural production. And indeed, the banking sector and the private sector. In the last 3 days, I'm sure I've spent close to 10 hours with the Minister of Agriculture just to ensure that we interrogate what he's planning to boost, to support the boost in agriculture. And he has been doing he has a splendid plan. He has now funding for it, and he has the drive and energy and the support of Mr. President. And I believe we will see more being done across the country. The agriculture is a low-hanging fruit to help us to produce more, reduce inflation, generate income, and even export more. So we will do that.
All right, thank you very much. Well, the questions are coming, and we'll take them as they come, and I guess we'll respond to them. But Minister, let's look at one other aspect of, okay, another call coming through, this time from Enoch from Benue. Go ahead, please. Good evening.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, go ahead. Right, Enoch from Benue, are you still there? Or do we just move ahead? Well, it's a dropped call there. Yes, Minister, we're talking about the allocations, the breakdown. Now, we see that defense, the three topmost, defense, police and agriculture, which has been discussed so far. the defense is what I want to start with now, putting more money to defense.
I actually have advice for the minister.
Right.
Well, even before the 2024, sorry.
Okay, so, okay, maybe now the phones, we're back to the phones again. Mohammed from Kano, you say? Okay, Mohammed from Kano, let's hear you quickly. Sorry, Minister, we'll come back to that matter. Hello, Mohammed from Kano, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. Hello?
Go on.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, what's your question or comment?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a wonderful panel, and I thank the federal government for providing us with. So, in part, goes to the minister as well to the professors. Yeah, since 1960 or thereabout, Nigeria has been doing budget every year, budget every year, budget. And the government will tell us that we will provide you with road, we will provide you with agriculture, we will provide you with health, security, and some other projects. So up to today, as I'm saying, there is no one single project that the federal government will show to the masses that maybe the federal government will not come to this project, maybe agriculture, or maybe road, or maybe something like airport and some other distance. Up to today, we'll be budgeting so and so for agriculture, so for road and this. I think there is a way that we can solve all these issues. The issues of ongoing project this year, another year will be ongoing project, another year will be on. Why can't the federal government take 2 or 3 projects, let's say security, agriculture, and health, and implement that capital budget in these 3 aspects for this year, 2024 budget? Let us concentrate on these 3 projects so that the federal government maybe will execute these 3 projects within this year. By the time of, maybe if we implement it in these 3 projects,
well,
maybe we will come to the end of it.
Mohammed, what you're asking is not quite clear. You started off, Mohammed. Thank you, Mohammed. What your question is isn't clear at all. You started off by saying governments all over all these years has not completed a single project that has been in the budget, which is a fallacy, really. You ended by saying government should concentrate on only security, agriculture, and finish those projects. Those are not projects. Those are sectors of the economy. However, I believe your question would be, is really about how the government would ensure that projects in agriculture, which have been provided for in the budget, will be carried through, especially those in captured in the budget and those of, for the security sector as well. Minister.
Thank you, and thank you, Cyril. But maybe to respond to your question, I think government is work in progress. As you do well, as you implement budget, new challenges will come up. And even the budget itself is not an attempt to solve all the problems. It is an attempt to cognizant of all the challenges and the resources available to prioritize and do as much as one could and that is what this administration has started with. Mr. President inherited a budget that was passed for 819 billion naira. That's the first supplementary appropriation he inherited. He renegotiated with National Assembly. He said, I want 500 billion out of that money to fund palliatives so that it can provide succor. Secondly, we had in October a supplementary appropriation of 2.17 trillion that reflects the priorities of the administration. About 566 billion of that went to the defense and security sector. About another 600 billion went to the infrastructure sector. Another 400 billion went to the cash transfer to fulfill a promise, and then some for the cash award. So it was not a budget for all ministries, but it's a budget that was in recognition that let us give the security the money they need so that we can just demand of them. And that is what is being carried through in the 2024 budget. Try to get security right so that production within the economy, get infrastructure right so that logistics within the economy can move. So that is how Mr. President's mind has been working, and he has been leading. And this comes from what he did based on evidence in Lagos. When he became Lagos governor, he doesn't have all the resources. He prioritized. He migrated from the budget what the private sector can do. And even in this wise, we are doing the same. We have rolled out the red carpet for investors, and we are seeing some dividends for that. An investor is now building a coastal road from Lagos to Calabar. In Germany, we have seen agreements that were signed for gas, new gas project. So this is how we intend to use the budget process to generate confidence in the economy so that more resources can come in to fund those things that the private sector is capable of doing while the government continues to provide public investment to support overall investment.
All right. Back to the phones. This call is coming from Edo. Sardauna calling in from Edo State. Hello, Sardauna.
Yes. Good evening, Sis Toba.
Good evening.
Good evening, Sis Toba.
Good evening. Go ahead.
To all of you.
Right.
Happy New Year also.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the learned ones. I just want to make some comments.
Mm-hmm.
If the budget is to be successful, it all depends on the president and his team. But I'm worried. I am worried. I noticed that his friendly arrogance of his order to give match to them who are his ministers, and some of his own men of integrity, he should think of their ethical behavior also. He stopped putting that into consideration in the operation of the budget, in implementation either. And I noticed one thing. He called himself a politician and a head of state. And he is a democratically elected president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I saw the ministers, all the henchmen of the country House of Assembly, they were clapping for him. It's like there's a jamboree about this very budget with them. He was well seated. Once again, I saw his friendly arrogance. I don't know how he's going to run
Sardauna,
the budget.
Sardauna, what is your question or comment? What exactly are you alluding to, Sardauna?
My exact comment is that I don't know how it's going to run the budget.
Okay.
Is it going to run it with his private money, his resources?
All right. You know what? The minister will tell you how we raised that question earlier on and how the budget will be funded. And the minister will re-emphasize how this budget will be funded. Minister.
Well, Sardauna, first let me say as representative of Mr. President, I do not understand what you mean by friendly arrogance, because this is a very down-to-earth person, a very humble person, someone who in his past life as senator, as Lagos state governor, interacts with all. And one of the things he even did in Lagos, which is mostly understated, is that not only did he provide a platform for dreamers to achieve their dreams to become billionaires, wealthy from all parts of Nigeria, he also worked hard to ensure that those at the lower end of the income strata in Lagos were included. Many of us who worked in Lagos before in the 90s knew how even crossing Apambon Bridge or some of the roads in Lagos was a nightmare, because there are social miscreants and boys who felt they have not been included in society by society, or the social contract between them and society. But when he came as governor, he recognized their humanity. He made sure that his programs included them. And within a short time, they became very confident and very proud of themselves. Only somebody with a humane mindset will have led that kind of revolution. And indeed, he's bringing that up. So when you see politicians clapping for him, but I guess maybe you meant when he went to present the budget. These are serious people elected by different constituencies. Nobody is paying them to do so. They did that out of admiration and respect for him. And I believe we should be happy that we have a leader that the broad strata of our society are proud of. In terms of budget, I've said it already. You have heard it from the distinguished professors, Professor Ike and the two professors, one from Ibadan and Louisiana on this panel, that budget is based on assumptions. We have made assumptions, but in fact, we are not even just dependent on oil revenue, because over the last few years, the structure of the government revenues have improved significantly. Value-added tax is a significant component. Company income taxes is a significant component. Electronic transfer levy. So it is a diversified mix, and with the measures we are taking, we believe it will expand more. That's, I believe.
All right, thank you so much, Minister. We have another caller this time from Lagos. Michael calling in from Lagos. Hello, Michael. Michael from Lagos.
Yes, this is Michael from Lagos.
Go ahead.
I just want to make some comments. Okay. My first comment is that when we are talking about revenue and expenditure, the revenue we're supposed to do more effort in our revenue than expenditure. For example, our international trade. We should spend more. We should gain more from international trade, not that we losing more money in international trade. There are some unnecessary things that we import, which we are not supposed to import, which I can't mention them now because of time. So we have our natural resources. We are not really working on our natural resources due to there are many lands there. But what are those lands used for? Nothing, just there for nothing. And with this, there's unemployment. Unemployment has caused many youth to do wrong things. And we are talking about investment. What are we doing about our youth? What are we doing about our future generation? These children are our future generations, and we are not working on them. So with us not giving them any job, or people that drop out, just not employ them, it's making them to do wrong thing, and it's making them to be easily influenced. And this will not make them to go far in life. And you see, even though we plan to make the economy of Nigeria to be good, these youths are still going to come back and still rein it back.
All right, Michael, thank you very much. And straight to it, I think the concentration here would be what the budget has to offer in terms of bringing down the very high rate of unemployment, particularly among the youths. This is critical to achieving whatever the nation plans to, this administration particularly.
I'm sure all the panelists are very competent to speak on this, but I'll just say this quickly, that all the measures, all the items in the 8-point of agenda, from the agriculture and food security to poverty eradication to inclusivity and access to capital, are designed to give a boost to the economy so that people can find jobs, can generate incomes, and can find such, especially the youth. That is why the president, in his own wisdom, separated the Ministry of Youth from the what used to be Ministry of Youth and Sport, so that the minister will have the exclusive mandate to drive and do more for the youth sector. We have a youth investment fund, a 25 billion naira youth investment fund in the budget. We have a digital ideas program, which is close to 400 million US dollars, where registration of 3 million youth have already started in order to teach them digital skills. We have, like I said, we have created consumer credits funding mechanism and mortgages to give our youth a break so that they can live their dreams, they can find satisfying incomes, and then their income is not overstretched such that they can't fund a good life.
All right, Professor Kenny, this issue.
I'm going to come to that. One thing I want to actually mention to the minister, I have 3 things really. One is that if you look at Saudi Arabia and America, they have huge crude reserves. How can we begin to think of building strategic crude reserves, both in crude and in gas? Why this is important is, if you want to use Nigerian licensed people to do that, fine, wherever you want to do that. But it is important for you to look at how long it's taking Dangote to get crude. Then how about other modular refineries getting access to crude? The reserve allows you to shore up volume. So when government says we want 1.8 million barrels a day, whatever you can get, you augment from your reserves. And when the things are down, you build your reserve. I'll just leave that for the minister. The second one, when you look at our budget fundamentals, it's always about oil price and oil production volume. We've got to move away from that. You will still be there, but we have to move away from that because, first of all, the petroleum is only about 5% of our GDP. Just only about 5.something% of our GDP. Non-oil sector is 95%. Then you come to the services. Services are 54 to 55% of our budget, not of our budget, of our GDP. Growth rates, the positive growth rates we'll get are from actually services. And so what you need to do, we have to begin to think, and even the oil is almost going to be less than 40% of government revenue. It is not that significant. It's just the forex component that causes all the disturbance we have in our economy. So we have to look for a proxy for growth in services so that we can have it as one of the for budget fundamentals. And let me give you an example of that. If you look at ICT, it poses 16% of our GDP. It has growth of almost 10%. You look at banking sector, it's about just about 4 or 5%, but then it has huge growth. So something that is common to 2 of them is payment, digital payment. Now, digital payment, Nigeria is number 6 in the world in 2021 in digital payment. We are doing 1.8 billion transactions. America is only doing 1.2 billion. Brazil, 1.6 billion. Now, 6 months after that, in 2022, we started doing 3.5 billion transactions. And now, targeting almost 3 trillion transactions. Yes, you can see that money is collected. As soon as you make any payment, government gets it. So it is one place where you can put in your target and your benchmark, and then you now support the industry. You support FSS, all this digital inclusion, all of them will be heading to give you more revenue from that. It's within our reach. The third thing that should be in that is solid mineral composite index. Until you put a target in that frame that says we expect this, that solid mineral should move from 0.3% to 2%, and then to have a solid, I wouldn't say gold only or say any metal, because we have 44 solid minerals. We have a composite mineral index, solid mineral index, that will be there. So that puts pressure so that we don't overflog this issue of oil, put pressure on other indicators that will fund our revenue. Then, of course, you come to the third one. If you all we hear is agriculture, 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 I have to tell you this. This same ministry of us, which is yours now, has actually developed bioeconomy as the new economy. In Germany, it accounts for 25% of their GDP, and then is growing at 30% and has 2.4 trillion euro as the component of that. We believe in our planning. We did in national planning. We budgeted that we would say it will be about 20% by 2030. So this is an area, just I was talking about agribusiness, but you're moving from agribusiness to bioeconomy, and it connects using technology to connect science and technology, the agriculture, water resources, the Ministry of Health because of pharmaceutical and biomedical, and then trade and industry. So all of these ministries, all their production arms and all this is all about technology, leveraging them. So that's a new direction for growth for our economy, and it is actually being led by our ministry. Okay. With massive implication for youth employment.
All right. Let's go over to Professor Olomola. It's been very quiet at that end in Ibadan for some time. Prof, well, you followed a number of the questions that have been raised for the minister here, and some suggestions that have also been made, and you've also listened to his response to those issues. What are your thoughts on those, particularly to deal with the matter of unemployment, security? We did mention that defense has taken a huge part this time around, and then agriculture.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. I think these are very important comments and concerns, but I want to look at three aspects of the budget first. Let's throw them open. If we look at the expenditure side, we have capital expenditure. It's open for all of us. We have recurrent expenditure. We have all the sectors. We have debt services. We know who owes. But we have the area of transfers. This remains a black box in the budget. We don't know what this entails. And if you look at the major government agencies where transfers go to, we know the problems we have been facing over the last few years about NDDC, about Northeast Development Commission, and all that. These are not seen clearly in the budget. We do not know. About 6% of the budget goes into transfers, 1.7 trillion. But we don't know what they do with it. We don't know how their budgets. I think this budget should be opened up. The budgets should be opened up so that we know exactly where these funds are going and what they are contributing to the growth of the economy. So I think this is an important point. Over the years, we put this money there, goes for transfers. Midway in the budget year, we hear about all sorts of things, and most of the projects that have been implemented under these transfers, over some 12 years, they have not been completed. They have not been completed. Some 15 years, they have not been completed. Some have been totally abandoned. And it's because we don't see them when they come out during the budget year. We wouldn't know. They go to the agencies, and they do what they like, and then projects are abandoned. So I think this is one area. In terms of unemployment, the constituency projects will help one way or the other in terms of improving the situation with youth unemployment. But even then, the type of projects, where they are situated, who needs them, I think needs to be more participatory, so that the benefits can go widely among the youth that will need to carry out this work. I think this is very, very important. The sovereign, sector-wide votes, for example, seems so large, 4.1 trillion this time. Now, if the budget is so stable, if we are craving for stability and to remove uncertainties, contingency funding of the budget shouldn't be as huge as 4.4 trillion as a service-wide. And this will make monitoring very difficult. So I would advise that we find a way of monitoring the use of service-wide vote and of reducing the trend over the years. Now it has grown from 2.18% in 2018 to 16.18% in 2024. I think we need to address it because it makes budget monitoring very difficult. If we continue to use this service-wide vote, some that are special projects put under this, how are they monitored? And how are we going to be effectively monitoring the service-wide vote so that they can deliver, so that they can contribute to the overall target in the growth of the economy that this budget has set at 2.9%. So I think this is one area I would also want us to see. Human capital development is an emphasis in this budget, and the right emphasis for that matter. If you look at the students' loan is part of this, and then even school feeding, about 100 billion. These are very desirable allocations so that we can have development, human capital, and so on. But one area we need to look into is the curriculum in our institutions. We see the way teaching is being done now. Will it be compatible with 21st century in terms of the innovation that will help us develop this economy? The type of teaching that's being carried out, even the type of courses that we undertake in our high institutions. We need to look at their relevance, their appropriateness, the way they are being delivered. How innovation and research will go into improving the standard of this teaching. If we don't do this, how are we going to industrialize? How are we going to have an economy that is technology-driven in the 21st century? The economy that will meet the targets of about 3-point-something% that we set in the budget, and even to compare ourselves with other African countries that are at 6.5, 7.1, like I've mentioned before. I think we need to look at the curriculum, go to the education sector, look at the curriculum, and let us have a drastic evaluation and overhaul of our curriculum.
Well, thank you, Prof. Well, we're running out of time already, and so, yes, Minister.
Say, I think every item in the service whiteboard is described, and there is a reason why sometimes things are put in the service whiteboard, because they don't lend themselves easily to allocation in one ministry. The biggest item, for example, is pensions and gratuities, because all the retired personnel of the federal government or who are funded by the Treasury are being paid from the, not by one ministry, but by the system. Equally, the second largest item after the service whiteboard is the provision, 550 billion naira provision for wage awards, because this cannot lend itself to allocation to ministry, one ministry or the other. Equally, the provisions, 100 billion naira provided for consumer credit, because the implementation modality has not been finalized, but it's designated there, it's put there as on the service whiteboard, where it clearly says consumer credit fund. Equally, there's 100 billion school feeding. So there's no item in the service whiteboard that you cannot see a description. There's 200 billion naira capital contingency and 36 billion naira recurrent contingency.
All right. Well, thank you, Minister. But let us now quickly go to Professor Iledari. We run out of time, and so we might just ask you to take your closing comments at this point.
You almost forgot me here, but that's fine. I think I'll just encourage the Minister of Economic Planning to make sure that they follow the budget sources of revenue. And if you allow me to quickly comment, I think I don't want us to mix GDP and revenue. Anybody that is talking in Nigeria and saying they don't need oil is making a mistake. And I hear some comments that oil is contributing 5% to GDP, but the revenue that is spent in Nigeria, which is creating the multiplier effect in the economy, comes from oil. Anytime you see oil revenue is not growing, Nigeria goes down. So we have to come to terms and not just begin to diminish the importance of the oil sector. Right now, it is still the engine that drives the Nigerian economy. And even the relevance of Nigeria in the world is still tied to oil. Yes, diversification of GDP is okay. But when it comes to the revenue Nigeria will need to fund this budget, it's still going to be engine on oil. And that's why the assumption that is tied to oil in this budget is very important. There's no sector in the Nigerian economy today that can generate the type of revenue the government will need to fund the spending. You can go back and monitor the contribution. So we cannot allow for now for the oil sector to collapse. And that's why whenever I have the opportunity, 3 institutions are very critical if oil is supposed to continue to drive the path to economic development and growth in Nigeria. The commercial institution in the PIA is NNPC Limited. It must be allowed to function as a private company so it can become something like Saudi Arabia is. The second institution are the 2 regulatory institutions, the midstream and downstream regulatory institutions and the upstream regulatory institutions. They must allow them to function as independent regulators if we are going to not get this economy to collapse. And if we want to meet the budget estimates for 2024, these institutions are critical, whether you like it or not. And the other one is the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, and it's the weakest link in these institutions. And unless they interact and function effectively and efficiently, you can say whatever you want with biodiversity economy or, yes, agriculture is contributing more to GDP, but not the immediate need of the economy.
All right.
And that's why royalty payment, petroleum income tax, which is what we call the corporate income tax from the oil and gas sector. There's no sector that's going to give you the type of money for now than the oil and gas sector.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Prof. We just about run out of time there, and we thank you for your contributions. And finally, Minister, on the final note, we'll just give you the benefit to once again underline the significance of what was given to this country yesterday by way of the 2024.
Well, I believe we have a budget that is a game changer. But in the words of Mr. President, a budget is only as good as its implementation. And therefore, I will use this opportunity to once more re-echo Mr. President's invitation to all stakeholders to join us in making government accountable and interrogating what the government do, so that we can generate the revenue, we can implement the budget, and continue along the path that we have taken, the right path that will see us deliver prosperity. And what I saw today, comment by Ken Ipe, Professor Omola, Wumi Iladare, and indeed the various scholars, as well as anchorship, give us confidence that this invitation
All right, Minister, and that's it. On the final and on a lighter side, you give us assurances that this headmaster's son, as you told us,
yes,
would carry out just like the headmasters of old.
Indeed.
Well,
indeed, Cyril.
Right.
And with the support of Mr. President, I believe we will do that. My team and I will do that.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Minister Atiku Bagudu, Minister of Budget and Economic Planning. Thank you for being here. Professor Ken Ife, it's always a delight. Thank you. And Professor Olomola, we appreciate your contributions, just as we do with Professor Iledari. Thank you all for being part of this program tonight. We appreciate you. And for all those who called in as well, we appreciate your calls. Next week, we'll be back with NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stover. Have a prosperous and fulfilling 2024.